أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وأفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين ورضي الله تعالى عن سادة التابعين وعلماء العاملين وأئمة الأربعة المجتهدين ومقلديهم إلى يوم الدين أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Alhamdulillah, we begin the praises of Allah and we send complete peace and blessings upon our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as well as his companions. We pray that Allah the Most High is pleased with the elite from among the Tabi'een, the four Mujtahid Imams, and all of those who follow to the day of judgment. Ameen. Alhamdulillah. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to all of you who beat me to the greetings, especially Fatima Muhammad, Fatima Burke, Malika, Imari, Jackie, Brother Talib, who else did I miss? Muhammad, Miss Joanne, Abdul Bar. Who did I miss? I got yeah, all of y'all. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'm feeling some kind of way though. Fatima Burke hurt my feelings. When she gave the greetings to Imam, Naeem Abdullah, and our beloved sister Samira. Why can't I get a beloved? Why she got to just get the beloved? I'm jealous. My feelings are hurt. Why got to be our beloved sister Samira? Just email Naeem, but our beloved sister Samira. My feelings are hurt. Is Samira there? Samira, you there? Alhamdulillah, I feel good now. I'll be loved Imam Naeem. Okay, I'm good now. Alhamdulillah. Allahu Akbar. Alhamdulillah. I feel good. See, Samira not even here. She late. She get a beloved and she ain't even here to appreciate it. See what happens when you give the beloved to people like that? See? She ain't even here. She all late and stuff. Probably forgot about the class too, Samira. Alhamdulillah. MashaAllah. You know, I'm just messing with you. You know, last week we talked about, as we were reading from Beyond Bilal, there's a point that I want to drive home before we actually get into that. But I just want to kind of like go over certain things in general, nothing specific about the Caliphates or the empires, that the African empires that we covered already. I want to remind all of us that everything that we're reading about so far is before colonialism. It's before the colonial period. Sister Malika, we left off at page 93. So it was before the colonial period, everything that we read about. And unless, you know, especially for a lot of us, this information is new. And if it's not brand new, it's still relatively new because it's not something that's talked about. So a lot of names and, you know, names and places may sound strange to us. So I say that one of the reasons why I mentioned that, and that I remind you that this is before the colonial period, is to remind you that the countries that we know now, that we know of now, in Africa especially, didn't exist. There was no country named Mali. There was no country named Ghana. There was none of these countries didn't exist. So when you hear us talk about Mali and Ghana, we're not talking about the country Mali and Ghana. We're talking about pre-colonial empires that were much bigger than the countries that are now named Mali and Ghana. So that's one point that I wanted to drive home. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So also, I want to remind us that, things aren't like cut and dry, like one empire existed and it just, miraculously crumbled, and then, and then another one came up. Life don't work like that. Not only the British, Malika, all of Europe, basically. The Portuguese were among the first. The British and all of them were later. But you really had the Belgium, the British, French, the Italians, everybody. If you're not familiar with it already, look up the Berlin Conference. Look up the Berlin Conference. They literally had a meeting. It's like, all right, this area right here, over a big map. All right, the French, you're going to get that. Us Brits, we're going to take this, right? They literally carved up Africa like that. But in any case, right? So the second point that I wanted to drive home is that many of these kingdoms existed at the same time. The time periods overlap. Sometimes they fought each other. And then sometimes, like in the case of the Malian Empire, it actually absorbed the Ghana Empire. It actually absorbed the Ghana Empire. So if you were to look at the maps of these two empires, you will see that a lot of their territory overlapped. And for a lot of some period of time, they existed at the same period of time. But at some point, the Malian Empire ate up and swallowed, and they fought, and they didn't fight one time. They fought. It was ongoing beef, and absorbed the Ghanaian Empire. And last week we mentioned a point that I want to drive home again, because like I said, this is another point in African Islamic history that you have to put a pin in it. You know how like you have a stream like this, for example, or a Facebook post, and the person whose page it is able to pin a comment so it stays top. So no matter who come in, you go to that comment. This is what we need to do with that part of history that we mentioned last Thursday, because it is a point in history that many come with half truths in order to trick you into believing that the quote unquote Arabs enslaved and forced Islam on the Africans. And he sort of kind of touches it in this book. But I gave you a parable last week to kind of like drive the point home. As I said earlier, the kingdom of Ghana, who was heavily Islamically influenced, as well as the kingdom of Mali, they were always beefing with each other. They're always beefing. And to the north of them, you had a growing group, a Jamaat, called the Morabitun. Most English books, you see them referred to as Moravid. You spell it with a V. That's the Anglicization of the word murabitun. Like Allah mentions in the Quran, to be patient against us. And then he mentions uh, Rabitu. Rabitu, like really means like to secure the borders, but a ribat is like, for lack of better words, a military fortress. But historically, these ribats were at the borders of new Muslim territory. Like Islam grew and expanded, and then at the borders of these Muslim territories would be like little small cities. But they didn't start out as small cities. They literally started out as fortresses. And then Muslims from the Muslim places that already became what were established would literally go there and live there. Why would they do that? Because of that verse in the Quran, I believe it's the last verse of Surah Al-Imran that I just paraphrased. The Arabic escapes me at the time, but Allah commands you to hold down the fort, literally, to hold down the fort. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And there's many hadith from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam elucidating the spiritual reward of even spending a moment protecting the Muslims in the ribat. So because of this, whenever Islam expanded and they would set up these fortresses, to protect the Muslim, the newly established Muslim lands, the old government coming back and try to take it, all that kind of stuff, reinforcements would come from the Muslim, already established Muslim territories to literally help hold down the fort, as we say. And the one who does that, who holds down the fort, he's called a murabit. And the plural of that is murabitun. And so you had a Jamaat that literally started basically in the modern day country of Senegal. But most of you, or most of us, probably first heard of them because they went into Spain a couple of times. Spain was already Muslim, but they got weak and started tripping and started fighting each other. And they had the Morabitun literally had to come out of Africa, go back into Spain and straighten out the Muslims and like that. So that's probably where a lot of us heard of them. But their original amirs and leaders were from Black Africa, but you hear about them basically in Mauritania and Morocco, even though the modern day countries of Mauritania and Morocco didn't exist at the time, but those areas there, you hear of them being from there, right? It's important. So now back to the Ghana Empire and Mali Empire. Morabitun is established to the north. Malian Empire is always beefing with the Ghanaian Empire. Islam is more deeply rooted in the Malian Empire. So at one point, the Malian Empire, the Ghanaian Empire fight again. They get help from the Morabitun, the Malian Empire. And that's when they absorb the Ghanaian Empire, right? That's why you got to watch these jokes. People come later and tell the story that the Morabitun, who they say were Arabs, and you know in your mind, the image that's going to jump to your mind is people who we normally see as Arabs in America. Right? Skin, pale, whatever. So they want to make you think black versus white. That's the objective. They want to make you thinking that some pale, white Arabs came and conquered a black empire. This is the outsiders. This is what they do. They leave out the fact that they were only helping another black empire that had already been beefing with the Malayan Empire. And to kind of like illustrate that, I gave a hypothetical example. I said you can use whatever city that you live in, where two parts of the same town or two different cities or two different sections of the same hood has always been beefing with each other. And for me being from Queens, I use the example of Hollis and Southside. I said, let's pretend that Hollis and Southside are two disbelieving neighborhoods, right? And they've been fighting with each other for ages, and they have been fighting with each other for ages. And I said, let's pretend that Hollis, most of them people took Shahada. Brooklyn has already been Muslim, hypothetically. Again, all of this is hypothetical, right? Hollis always been beefing with Southside before Islam even came into the picture. Now a whole bunch of dudes from Hollis took Shahada, but they still beefing with Southside. Something jump off on Jamaica Avenue at the Coliseum. Hollis versus Southside. I'm Muslim now. They running with a whole bunch of Brooklyn cats. And so now because of that new alliance, they got extra strength and they completely overwhelming and run through Southside. Right? That's hypothetical, right? Someone comes along later, right? And is writing a book about, old neighborhood beefs. And then when they tell that story, they say that Brooklyn came through, right? Brooklyn came through and went all through 40 Project, basically all over South Side, and crushed them and established Islam. Completely leaving out Hollis, right? And from another time period, looking back, right? They done took that book that someone wrote, made a movie out of it, whatever. And so people swear that's the law. That's what really happened. But people that know the history were like, wait a minute, Brooklyn ain't never had no beef with Southside. And Brooklyn wasn't even all like that. They was with Hollis. Hollis is the one who had the beef with it, right? And so I use that make-believe scenario that you can substitute any neighborhood you want in there, because all of our cities got neighborhoods that historically been beefing with each other, parts of the city. You just substitute it just to make the point. That's what happened. That is what happened. They changed the narrative. They left out a key player to make you think that some other ethnic group is coming in and forcing Islam on it. And this is extremely important. And the reason why it's important, and I mentioned all of that to lead up to this point, because the people that say that, they want you to believe that Islam was forced on Black Africans by outsiders. When we have statements from Black Muslim scholars themselves to the contrary. Shaykh Uthman and Fodio, Tagamatahullahu birahmati Ameen, may Allah envelop him in his mercy, Ameen. He has a book called Bayāni Wujūb al-Hijra. Bayāni Wujūb al-Hijra is like the Shaykh's equivalent to Ahkam al-Sultaniyya. That's a more famous book from an older period by Imam Marwadi, who talk about, for lack of better words, political theory, how to establish, Islamic community, how to, the rules of jihad, the rules of government, the rules of amirs and caliphs, all that stuff is in it. Shaykh has a book called Bayāni Wujūb al-Hijra. And in the first chapter, he's talking about the legal ruling or the legal judgment of Black Africa, meaning are they Muslims, they non-Muslims, whatever, and he breaks them down into three categories. And after mentioning all of that, he says, if you were to ask me if Islam was forced on the Black Africans, I will quote Shaykh Ahmadu Baba of Timbuktu, right? And then he quotes, he says, قال الشيخ أحمد بابا في كتاب الكشف wal-Bayāni l-Asnāfi Majlūb is-Sūdān إنهم أسلموا بلا استيلاء أحد عليهم. He says, Shaykh Ahmadu Baba said in his book, al-Kashfi wal-Bayāni l-Asnāfi Majlūb is-Sūdān, verily, they embraced Islam without being conquered by anyone. So you have Black African scholars, and Sheikh Ahmed Baba is from the 1500s, the 16th century. He's saying this. He's saying this basically, just to give you some context, around the same time period as the slave trade is kicking up. And who's quoting them? Sheikh Uthman bin Fodio, may Allah have mercy on him, who died in what? He died in the year 1232, 1817. He's coming in at the tail end of the period of enslavement. And he's saying the same thing by quoting him, right? So when you listen to what people on the ground have to say, that their people, Black Africans, embraced Islam without being conquered by anyone. And so I mentioned and given all those scenarios, I'm mentioning all of that just to drive that point home, because, you know, people who hate Arabs because they hate Islam, or they hate Islam because they hate Arabs, whichever one comes first. This is one of the time periods in history that they use by twisting the truth, right? By omitting some information out to try to trick unsuspecting people that don't know this history, into believing that some outsiders came and forced Islam on the West Africans. And that's not the case. So again, that quote, I actually put it in the description of this video. So if anyone wants to copy and paste it, it's there. So the Black Africans embraced Islam without being conquered by anyone. In other words, any outsiders. See if I Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Abdul Rahman and Abdullah Isa and Abdul Rahim. Assalamu alaikum. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. Shukr. Is it their tradition that you are carrying on teaching Maliki faith in the books? Well, I wouldn't say all that. That's my intent. You know, whether I'm doing a good job at it or not, that remains to be seen. But that's what I try to do personally. That where the Moors originated. When they talking about the Moors, that's who they're talking about, the Morabitun. And I don't know, but I personally believe that's where the word Moor comes from. Morocco, Mauritania. I believe it comes from Morabitun, that Jamaat. And there's a later Jamaat that took that same name and took their inspiration from them. The Amir was Sheikh Abdul Qadir al-Murabit, and later he stopped using that. He started going by Sheikh Abdul Qadir as-Sufi, rahimahullah. He just passed maybe last year, the year before. He influenced so many people. A lot of people that y'all probably wouldn't even know was influenced by it. So many people, right? A lot of American Malikis that you know, white and black, at one time was directly influenced by them, and a lot of them were in his Jamaat. But they, at one time, their community was went by the title Morabitun, named after the ancient Morabitun. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Isa. I wonder if the brother is from Hollis. I am from Hollis. That's why I use the example, because I know the story well. Alhamdulillah. Samira, you there?
Yes. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah. You know, your sister, your ride or die, right? Your sister, Fatima Burke, right? She offended me earlier. She apologized. But when she gave the greeting, she's, beloved Samira, right? You was late. You wasn't even here to catch the beloved, right? But that's all right.
Why are you getting offended?
I want some love too. Shoot. I need love. You don't mean to be.
Mashallah.
Alhamdulillah, how you doing?
Alhamdulillah, good.
You ready?
Busy, but alhamdulillah. When I'm not busy.
You ain't doing nothing. You ain't doing nothing until you busy.
Okay, whatever.
Alhamdulillah. No, Imari, snitches are supposed to get stitches, not the haters. This not hate. This is love hate. I'm hating because I want to get some love. Alhamdulillah.
Oh, for that. I'm cracking up. Subhanallah. You're the best. Alhamdulillah. Shukran, Sister Imari. That's my girl. Alhamdulillah. That's my girl.
Man, all these sisters is your girl. Can I get somebody to ride with me, man?
Alhamdulillah.
Durahim, you ready to ride? Isa, are you ready to ride, man?
Nah, y'all brothers, y'all got issues.
These sisters be having Samira's back when there's no need to have her back.
That's ride and die.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Khadija.
Alhamdulillah.
You remember where we left off at?
Yep.
Okay, so before you start reading there, two things. The Songhai Empire, right? The Songhai Empire absorbed the Malian Empire, right? So that's why you saw the use of the word Songhai used kind of like interchangeably, right? So that's extremely important. Let's recite al-Fatiha for the author of this beautiful text, Mustafa Briggs. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala increase him in all that is good and give them the reward of all of us who are benefiting from this book.
Ameen.
Bismillah.
Bismillah. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammadin wa alihi wa sahbihi wa salama tasliman. Alhamdulillahi wa kafa wa salamu ala ibadihi alladhina istafa. Amma ba'd. In the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful, I seek refuge in Allah from the rejected shaitan. May Allah bless our master, Sayyidina Muhammad, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, his family, companions, and give them peace. All praise is due to Allah, for he is sufficient for us. Peace be upon his slaves, whom he has peace upon his slaves who has follows. As to what follows. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to everyone. And wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to everyone that has given the greetings. So we're on page 85 on the bottoms. Mali.
No.
Yes.
No. 93.
Yes.
93.
No, it was 85. We didn't do all of this because I said we're going to come back because it was too long.
No. I say we want to do Songhai. We read all through Mali already.
Okay, you're right.
Apologize.
I apologize to the world, to you, in front of the world. You accept my apology. I have my bookmark at that where we started off last week.
I need y'all to put a pen in it. A black woman was wrong, acknowledge the mistake, and apologize. See? It's a special moment right there. Pause.
Subhanallah. My bookmark was in the wrong spot. I'm sorry.
Hmm.
All right. Alhamdulillah. Songhai, page 93. The Songhai Empire began as a Bismillah. The Songhai Empire began as a small but prosperous kingdom in the city of Gayo in eastern Mali. Gayo was one of the main centers of the gold trade and became so wealthy that it attracted the attention of the neighboring Mali Empire, who conquered it and annexed it into its territories. During the reign of Mansa Musa II, the grandson of Mansa Musa I, the Songhai military commander Sani Ali Bur revolted and claimed independence from Gayo, becoming the first king of the Songhai Empire.
See, right here, see, we just read about Mansa Musa and the Malian Empire. So you see how the overlap is not just like, okay, that happened over here, then this happened over here after that. No, it's a lot of overlap. You understand? Go ahead.
Bismillah. He continued to expand his kingdom by capturing the major cities of Timbuktu in 1468 and Djenné in 1475, and eventually conquering what remained of the once mighty Mali Empire. After the death of Sani Ali, his son Sani Baru took over the empire, and one of his father's generals, Askia Muhammad Torre, launched a revolt against him, stripping him of his crown and throne. His rise to power is described as such in the Tariq al-Sūdān. When the
Once again,
news
that's one of the books that chronicles the history of Black Africa. So you should highlight Tariq al-Sūdān. Again, remember, this is happening in a place where these modern countries don't exist. When you're talking about this time period, like pre-colonial, when you say Sudan, you're talking about Black Africa. You're not talking about some country in East Africa. No. In the same way, like when you talk about Mali, you're not talking about some country in West Africa or Ghana, some country in West Africa. No, these were big empires. So Sudan basically uh, would be basically black sub-Saharan Africa. And that's how it used to be referred to in our literature. Go ahead.
Bismillah. When the news of the victory of Muhammad ibn Abu Bakr reached the daughters of Sani Ali, they shouted, Askia, which means in the language of Sonike, no, not him. When he heard this, he ordered that he should only be surnamed that. Thus he came to be called Askia Muhammad. By
So
means of
stop
him,
there. Stop there. So basically, the uh, the 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 descendants, the children of the dynasty that he overthrew, was like, oh no, not him, and he flipped it. It was like, oh no, not him. Well, that's what we're going to name the kings from this dynasty going forward. Oh no, not him. So that's what Haskia means. So I'm sure we know a lot of us know brothers that are named Askia. That's where they're getting it from. Askia. This is where it comes from. Go ahead.
Bismillah. By means of him, Allah released the Muslims from their grief and torment and removed the affliction and misfortunes which have befallen them. He made strenuous effort in establishing the religion of Islam and improving the affairs of mankind. He used to keep company with the scholars, asking their advice concerning all the affairs which were required of him to discharge and resolve. Like Mansa Musa before him, Askia also completed the Hajj to Mecca while traveling with an overwhelming amount of gold. In the Tariq, it is stated in the year 902 after Hijrah, he traveled to the pilgrimage during the month of Safar. He made the pilgrimage to the sacred house of Allah along with a large contingent from the notables of every tribe. As for the wealth, he brought with him 300,000 mithqals of gold, roughly $73 million. The Emir gave away as alms 100,000 mithqals of gold while he was in the two sacred places, Mecca and Medina. In Mecca, he worked with the Sharif of Mecca, who ruled the Holy Land on behalf of the Mamluk Sultan in Egypt, to establish a hostel for African pilgrims who visited the Holy Lands as a waqf. Upon his return from the Hajj, he recruited Muslim scholars from Egypt and Morocco to teach at the Sankore Mosque in Timbuktu while establishing many other learning centers throughout his empire. al-Sūdān informs us he also purchased a garden in the sublime city of Medina and made it a religious bequest for the people of West Africa, Takrur. This garden is well known there. He also spent an additional 100,000 mithqals, purchasing merchandise all that they needed with the same money. He met in that blessed land the Sharif and sought from him to appoint him as his Khalifa in the land of Songhai. The Sharif was content with that and ordered him to relinquish his authority for 3 days and then come to him on the fourth day. The Askir did this, and he appointed him as his Khalifa, placing upon his head his own skull cap and turban. Thus, the Askir was appointed a legitimate Khalifa in Islam. This passage illustrates that his authority was legitimized and recognized by the wider Muslim world. In Cairo, on his way back to West Africa, he attended the lectures of the famous polymath and heavyweight scholar Jalaluddin Suyuti and brought many of his books back with him, including Tafsir al-Jalalain, which became indispensable to the West African Islamic curriculum. The Tariq.
So we need to pause right here because this point is extremely important. So he met and sat with Imam al-Suyuti, who wrote so many books. He wrote Tariq al-Khulafa, Tafsir Jalalain. If you know anything about West African scholarship and curriculum, it's like one of the main go-to books of tafsir. And Jalalain literally means the two Jalals. Uh, one of Imam Suyuti's teachers, Jalaluddin al-Mahali, began writing a tafsir, but he died before he completed. And so Imam Suyuti completed the tafsir. That's why it's called, if you translate that in English, the commentary of the two Jalals. The commentaries of the two Jalals. And so a lot of times when the Shaykh Uthman bin Fodio, may Allah envelop him in his mercy, when he quotes this Imam Suyuti's tafsir, he will call it the takmila, which means the completion, right? Because he completed the tafsir that his teacher, Jalaluddin al-Mahali, completed. But it's important because when he came back to West Africa, he brought that tafsir with him and introduced that to the West African scholarship. And this remained, even though all this time West African, basically in terms of fiqh anyway, was for the most part Maliki. But still, even to today, where African scholarship is still vibrant and the people are still Maliki, they still read Tafsir Jalalain, Shafi, right? So it's an extremely important point. He brought that back to West Africa. And it's still, we're still benefiting from that and his meeting with Imam Suyuti to this day. Askir Muhammad Torre. Alhamdulillah. Continue.
Bismillah. He then met many of the scholars and the righteous of Egypt. Among them was Jalaluddin Suyuti, whom he questioned concerning certain things among his affairs. The Shaykh gave him legal decisions concerning them. In addition, he sought from the Shaykh to make supplication for him. Thus, the Askir was able to attain much barakah from them. He returned to his land after 3 years. He entered
I want
Gao.
to stop right there because this point right here is extremely important. right? He was a soldier. I mean, he had knowledge, but he wasn't necessarily considered a scholar. But when he overthrew Sunni Ali Bir, he had the support of the ulama, because Sunni Ali, he claimed to be Muslim too, but he was like, yeah, like a lot of these guys now, right? Muslim in name only, but they wasn't establishing Islam or not like that. In fact, they were oppressing Muslims, just like a lot of these guys now. And so when Askia Muhammad Torre overthrew him, he had the support of the ulama, the support of the scholars. And you can see, even when he left Black Africa and went to make Hajj and was in the Haram and was in the Hijaz and was in Egypt, he sat with the scholars and got the blessings and the support from the scholars. And this is extremely important, because in the Black Muslim communities in America, right, there's usually a break, a rift between those who are scholarly and those who are leaders. And people don't know their place in our community, right? People go overseas and study and come back and want to overthrow the leadership. Or the leadership don't want to take advice from the learned ones in the community. And so everyone has to know their place. Just because you are learned, that don't mean you should be a leader. Because you could have a lot of knowledge and be a coward. It takes heart to be a leader, right? That's one of the characteristics of a leader. You got to have heart. You can't be afraid to speak the truth, when you know it, and be a leader, right? But if you don't have that in you, leadership ain't in you. You should be behind the leader, feeding the leader with the proper information so he can make the proper decisions. It's extremely important. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Anthony and Yahya. So this is a good example. And when we mentioned the book Bayan al-Wujub al-Hijra by the Shaykh, he talks about this, about one of the characteristics of the great Imam, meaning the Khalifa, the overall leader, is he has to have shujaa. He has to have courage. He has to have courage. And he has to be, or he should be, a scholar, right? A mujtahid, in fact, talking about the Khalifa, right? The big overall leader of the Muslims. But if that's not the case, he should surround himself with the scholars. And so even for us, we're not talking about, none of us is the Khalifa or Amir al-Mu'mineen, but even us in our local communities, right? We think the one person got to be everything. The leader have to be the most learned, and he has to have leadership qualities. A lot of times you can't find those things in one person. Sometimes a person has leadership qualities, but he's not the most learned in the deen. If that's the case, he has to understand that he needs to surround himself with those people in his community that do know the deen. And he has to, before he makes decisions, he has to consult them. As Allah says, shawirhum fil amr, consult with them in the affairs. And then make his decisions based upon it. Based upon, what he's, the advice and the parameters. Like, in other words, and like a lot of times people think that when you give advice, nasiha, to someone like a leader, that the leader is obligated to take your advice. No, if you're in this situation, maybe you're not the imam or the amir, but you are like the scholar in the community, right? Instead of trying to make the imam like a puppet where you controlling him, when he comes to you with advice, don't hold back information. Give him the enough information for him to evaluate the situation. Okay, listen, you got this. You got options. You can do this. You can do that. You can do that. You can do that. You can do that. You can't do that, and you can't do that. Personally, I think you should do this, but hey, this is what your options are. Then turn it back over to him. That's what an advisor does. And so this important person in our history, it should be a lesson for us, because he wasn't the most learned, but he had the heart and ability to get rid of that corrupt leadership and establish Islam. Some scholars that was around him couldn't do it. They ain't have it. He did. He was a soldier. So that's, I don't want none of y'all to miss that. This is an extremely important point. And plus, Let me see if you're going to mention it. I'll let you read the rest of it before we get it. Go ahead.
Bismillah. He entered Gail in the month of Dhul Hijjah at the completion of the year. Allah made his government prosper, assisted with tremendous assistance, and opened for him clear openings. He governed from the lands of Kunta to the Atlantic Ocean and its dependencies in the west, and from the lands of Binduku to Dagaza and its dependencies. Askia continued to be a patron of scholarship, reviving the prestige of the scholars of Timbuktu and Sakori University. He encouraged learning and literacy in the kingdom, ensuring that Songhai's universities produced the most distinguished scholars, many of whom published significant texts in a wide array of subjects. Among them was his nephew and friend Mahmud Kati, who wrote Tariq Fatash, History of
If you
West
remember
Africa.
last week, that's the other book that you need to understand West African history. So, Tariq al-Sūdān and Tariq al-Fatash, they both mentioned in this section. Go ahead.
Bismillah. And Abdul Rahman as-Sadi, who wrote Tariq al-Sūdān, History of the Black Lands, two history books that are indispensable to present-day scholars, attempting to reconstruct African history in the Middle Ages. The famous polymath Ahmed Baba was also another student of the university. He went on to
Stop right
produce.
there. That's the same scholar we quoted before we started reading when we quoted him saying that the black Africans embraced Islam without being conquered by anybody. That's what he's talking about. Sorry, go ahead.
Bismillah. He went on to produce indispensable tomes on Islamic law, history, and countless other subjects.
Alhamdulillah. One of the things that is not mentioned here is the fact that the Shaykh even himself, he quotes a lot from al-Maghili, uh, al-Masani, who was a scholar that lived during Askia Muhammad's time. And Askia Muhammad, he asked him a whole bunch of questions about government and all of these things. See, this is a ruler, and he brought the scholars close, like Umar ibn al-Khattab during the time of the Sahaba, right? Who obviously Umar was one of the scholars himself of the Sahaba, but he kept scholars around him, like the younger scholars, even like Abdullah ibn Abbas and others. And but Askia Muhammad Torre, he there's been a book that's been made out of a series of questions and answers between Askia Muhammad Torre and al-Maghini al-Masani, right? They call it Ajwiba, the answers, right, to the questions, right? And so that's been translated. It's probably one of them rare books that's hard to find in book form. This is Ajwiba. Just look up that. That's the short title, Ajwiba. Do I have those books? I do have those books. I don't have them for sale though. I have the Tariq al-Fatash. I have the English translation of that. I need to get me an Arabic. And Tariq al-Sūdān, I think I have it on my computer. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Maryam, alhamdulillah. We're going to pause there for today. Tomorrow, inshallah, we'll cover Canon Borno, and then we'll stop only with that because, tomorrow is the Black Imams Roundtable. I think we move back to 7 o'clock, but still. But we'll see, inshallah. If there's any questions or comments about what we covered tomorrow? Anything you want to add, Samira? Beloved Samira?
Yes, of course. As you can see, our ticker at the bottom of the screen, we have extended our fundraiser that we initiated in Ramadan. I've noticed that no one has donated to it, as though you're not going to get any rewards for donating to this cause. But let me tell you, that is a mistake. Don't just put all your eggs in one basket. I'm just going to give in Ramadan, and outside of Ramadan, it don't count. Who says that your donations in Ramadan was accepted? I wouldn't chance that. So you have opportunity to acquire more rewards and additional rewards. And who can stand the chance of risking that on the day of judgment? What is your scale going to look like? You don't know. This may be the very thing that may tip it over for you. So any amount is is acceptable, and it's welcoming to us. And we thank each and every person that has donated so far. So don't get stingy with your coins now, because Ramadan is over. We've got work to do. And this fundraiser is themed. We are all we got. And if you haven't got that memo yet, then you need to ask somebody. We all we got. If we want something to happen, we all we got. If you looking for something to happen, we all we got. Nobody is going to do it for us. And if we allow someone else to do it for us, guess what? We done sealed our fate. We done handed over our freedom, so-called freedom, over to our oppressors and our enemies. And they can do whatever they want with us, because we relinquished, what was in our hands to them. So if you care about your future, if you care about the future of your children and your children's children, if you care about the ummah of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, if you care about your hereafter, I implore you, help us make this this goal. We are almost halfway there. Almost. So we have to the end of this month to make that goal, and you will see some beautiful things by the permission of Allah happening. You just got to trust. Don't lose trust now. Don't just trust in Ramadan. Trust Allah outside of Ramadan too. He got you. And that's all I have to say. I love y'all for the sake of Allah.
Alhamdulillah. We definitely do. I do as well. Alhamdulillah. To answer your question, Abdul Rahim, it was Askia Muhammad daughter, who of the Songhai Empire, who brought Tafsir Jalalain. He didn't bring it to the empire. Him bringing it back to the empire really brought it back to Black Africa, West Africa. He brought it back from Egypt, and it's still now. Tafsir Jalalain is the top curriculum where you started at. All over Africa, you find Shuyukh teaching Tafsir Jalalain in their local languages, as well as the Arabic language, of course. But they're teaching it in their local language. So he's the one that brought it. So alhamdulillah, we're benefiting from what he did today. Alhamdulillah. Did I miss any other questions?
Let me see here. Aldo trying to start some stuff. You had mentioned about me apologizing. I remember this comment. He said Kevin rolling over in his grave. Kevin doing more than that. He trying to answer them questions. I'm not sure how well he's going to answer them questions, but Kevin is doing something that we all are waiting to take a turn at. We forget about that. I've been seeing so much stuff on social media. We forget. Kevin is dead. Allah promised us maut, right? Death. We're gonna experience that. He is experiencing something that his Lord, our Lord, has promised us. And we should be shaking in our boots, heels, Nikes, whatever you are wearing, don't wear, maybe you just barefooted. You should be scared. You should be petrified because Kevin can't come back. Kevin can't make up for all the stuff that he said and how he made people feel. Kevin is a done deal in this world. We are still here. So what are we going to do differently than him and other people? Right? What are we doing differently to improve our situations? That's what we need to ask ourselves, not sit here and argue about what he said and who he said it to and how he made people feel. You know, and I'm not saying I agree what he says and stuff like that, but sometimes the truth hurts. And sometimes we need to recognize when we getting played. We've been getting played right before Ramadan. We've been trying to be played. But Ramadan, it started with the slap. Then something else happened. Here it is. You got to wake up and open your eyes and see what's happening. Because it's clear what's happening. If you don't recognize it, I feel sorry for you. Go ask somebody. But that's all I got to say. That's all I seen up there. As far as any comments or anything, I wanted to say something about that.
As far as some more questions came up while you was preaching to us. Preach! Hold on. What is the rank of Uthman bin Fodio in the Maliki method? He's a mujtahid. Which is the highest ranking of a scholar. He was declared mujtahid by the scholars of his first, because this question is connected with Malika's question too, sort of kind of. I'll try to answer all of that in one, because Malika asked, it was a skier considered a mujaddid, even though he wasn't a scholar. To be a mujaddid, there's conditions. You know, all of these things aren't just applied because someone is famous or somebody does something. Just like, for prophets and messengers, there's conditions. And just like for different ranks of scholars and awliya, there are conditions. So the Shaykh, when he wrote his book, Ihya Sunnah wa Ikhmad Bid'ah, he was cleared the mujaddid of the age, the reviver of the age, right? In order to be considered a mujaddid, you have to be a mujtahid. So that's why I said they kind of answer both questions, right? So his rank in the school, he was a mujtahid, right? And as far as before him, Askia Muhammad, no, he wasn't considered a mujaddid, even though he wasn't a scholar. You need to be the highest ranking level of scholar to be a mujaddid. Now I'm answering what Malika said, just giving a little bit more commentary. That's technically speaking. You can use the word mujaddid in a non-technical way. Like I've seen Arabs call someone a mujaddid who revived one thing. They don't mean that that person is a mujaddid that the Prophet ﷺ spoke about. It just mean that they brought to life this aspect of the deen or that aspect of the deen, right? But in being technical, no, he wasn't considered a mujaddid. So I hope I can answer both of those questions in one thing. Is the curriculum in those empires being implemented today? And if so, is this the best curriculum to be implemented in the U.S.? I believe, so to answer your question, just like everything else is being eroded away. When you go throughout the African continent, you find the densely populated places, the places where there's a lot of tourism and a lot of people, in and out, whatever. You find, a lot of that stuff is going away. A lot of times you have to go out to the rural areas where people ain't really thinking about to see this type of traditional Islam being taught. And I personally think, I don't think it's the only curriculum need to be implemented, but I think it's one of the best, and it's natural for us. It's what was snatched from us when, on the slave boats and in the slave plantations, when they stripped Islam from us. This is the Islam that they took from us. This Ashari, Maliki, Tasawwuf-based tradition, creed, teaching curriculum, all of that. This is what they took from us. When you read what Umar ibn Said, who was enslaved in Fayetteville, North Carolina. When you read what we know about Muhammad Bilal and all of these other people who we have some documentation about their history, and they tell you what they learned and where they learned it at and where they was from, this is what they were learning. And this is what they were snatched away from. And so I think, like all things in the natural world, you know, things try to go back to their origin. Things things like to go back to where they came from. And I believe black people, even though we don't know it yet, but I think on a metaphysical level, on a subconscious level, that a lot of us are trying to get back to that, but we don't know it. I'm talking about even including the non-Muslims. They trying to get back to Islam, but somebody done lied to them along the way and made them hate Islam, made them think that some Arabs, some pale Arabs came and forced Islam on them, right? So they're like, oh, it can't be Islam where I came from. It must be something else, right? Must be the ancestors. It must be the energy. It must be these crystals. It must be something else. It can't be Islam, right? So, you know, he lied to us. It's amazing. A lot of times we're conscious, but we're conscious when it's convenient. Like we don't we don't trust certain people with our history, but we'll trust them when they lie to us about Islam, though. It's weird, though. Same people that lied, that you know lied to you about your history, they're lying to you about Islam. And you believe the lie about Islam, but you don't believe the lie about history. It's crazy. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Asiya, there. World. I'm assuming you mean, you said mujtahideen or mujtahids. Yes. I may not know him, but yes. 200-300 years ago. The Shaykh, he's one of them, right? 200-300 years ago. What was the most important element in creating a Muslim society? I believe, like the author of this book that we're going over, what he mentioned already, which was how Islam really spread in the African continent. They provided service, they provided khidmah and business and trade. Like when we go back to what we read about the Ghana Empire, right? The non-Muslim king established masjids. All of the high government officials were Muslim. And justice was being done. That's how Islam took root then. And so, and even in the Malian Empire, the same thing, but the rulers became Muslim. You see, that's the difference between the Ghanaian Empire and the Malian Empire. The rulers became Muslim in the Malian Empire. And remember, we read the story in here, how it was extreme drought. And there were some Muslims doing like they did in the Ghanaian Empire, providing service and just being good Muslims. Something that, you know, we just keep missing. We want to be Jehovah Witness in our dawah. We want to talk about Islam. We want to pass out printed materials about Islam. We want to share videos about Islam, but we don't want to be Muslim. Being Muslim is the best dawah. Just be what the book is talking about. Just be an upright Muslim. Stop being a foul dude. Stop being a foul woman, and you will bring people to Islam. And see, this is what they were doing. And so this wali from amongst the awliya of Allah, he told the king, like, listen, you want rain and all that stuff? I could pray for rain for you, and you get rain, right? But you're gonna have to give up this worship of these idols and all that kind of stuff. And that non-Muslim king followed his instructions, took Shahada at his hands, and they prayed for rain together. And rain came right after they finished making dua, right? And since then, they've been a Muslim entity. How did Islam get rooted in the Malian Empire? A Muslim wali of Allah, a Muslim protective friend of Allah, brought service by means of his connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The people needed rain, and we got it. It's God. We got the rain prayer, right? We know how to do this, right? And he used that as an excuse to give dawah. He gave dawah, and the ruler became Muslim. And ever since then, the ruler's been Muslim. We have to do the same thing. We keep trying to talk about it and tell people to read about it and tell people to watch videos about it. No, I'm just be about it. Just be Muslim. Just be, right? And don't be because people are going to see you. No, just really be Muslim. Really stop cheating people. Really stop lying to people. Really start treating your wife like a good woman, like a good sister. Really start treating your husband like a good brother. Really start taking care of your children. Really start being upright in business. Really, really, really just be it. That's dawah right there. That's dawah. And this is what they did. And they had the skill. They had the organization, they had the government, whatever, and they didn't use it like, hey, we got this thing, we us Muslims, we not the king, but we got the government locked down. Let's steal some money from the treasury. Nah, we ain't doing it. So and he highlights that in this book. And I think that's one of the main things we need to focus on, I believe. In this book. And he mentioned the same thing in a couple of lectures that I heard him give. He highlighted that in a lecture. Like, you want to talk about giving out, spreading Islam, right? Provide service and be upright. I think it's more than just the giving information. Like, even amongst the Muslim community, we just beating each other over the head with information. I'm right, you're wrong, and we just beating we just making each other's hearts hard against each other. But we're not actually being Muslim, even with other Muslims. We're not being Muslim, right? We're arrogant. Our egos are out of control, right? We throwing shade at each other for no reason, right? We fighting for followers and all that kind of stuff. This stuff is retarded. And we think that this looks attractive to people that's outside looking, but our egos are so inflated, we don't even care if our actions are turning other people away from Islam, right? We be doing just like all types of shady, sly stuff, seeking followers and seeking money. And we think that people are so stupid that they don't see what's going on. I'm sorry, I'm preaching again. What's that in the background, Samara?
Crayon.
You trying to tell me to shut up?
No, you can't help it.
Do you believe the distribution of zakat al-fitr had a visible impact on the people and helped to spread the practical aspects of Islam? Zakat al-fitr, that's really just for the Muslims. You mean zakat, the regular zakat? Of course, because one category of zakat where you have to distribute the zakat to are those people whose hearts are inclined to Islam. So that's the one category of non-Muslims that you can give zakat to. Those people they're like on the fence with Islam, whatever, you give zakat to them, right? So yes, the sciences was great in these times of math, exactly. Out of all the places you study, West Africa, is there one place in particular you would say has the most takeaway, or is it a combination of things? Correction, I never studied in West Africa. I'm just here in West Africa with my family, right? You would have to ask someone who has more extensive studying done in West Africa. I'm not the right one to answer that question. Adab, morals, what all of the students of the great imams learn before anything else. Exactly. Like, we just missing that. We think it's all right to have bad character, have a corrupt heart, and then still just go ahead, and we wonder why people just turned off by us. Alhamdulillah. So I think that's all the questions, Samira. Alhamdulillah. So if you wouldn't mind, beloved Samira, can you please close out? Beloved Samira.
I want to address Malika's comment. Y'all a hot mess. Correction. I'm rough around the edges. Never a hot mess. With that being said, سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam.